So moving on to colorectal cancer. So what is it? Well, it's in the name. It's a cancer of the colon or rectum, which is located at the digestive tract's lower end. Early cases can begin as non-cancerous polyps, which are often present 10 to 15 years before turning cancerous. And polyps often have no symptoms, and the only way you can know you have them would be by getting a colonoscopy. So this map here shows the distribution of colorectal cancer throughout the world. It uses data from 2022 and is published by the International Agency for Research on Cancer. And as we can see, it's predominantly a disease of the Western world, and you've got New Zealand shaded in dark green there. And then this shows who's dying of colon cancer, and again New Zealand shaded in bright red, who have some of the most highest mortality rates of colon cancer in the world. And if you just also notice, Japan in that map is also coloured in a dark shade of red, so they don't have great rates either. Which begs the question, why does the Western world, and in particular New Zealand, have such high colorectal rates of colorectal cancer? Now, the science isn't new to us. This landmark epidemiological study of Sir Richard Dole included this graph. This was published in 1975, and it shows a strong link between meat consumption and colon cancer incidence, with New Zealand leading the world on both accounts. And if you notice back here, you've got Japan, but they're not there anymore because their diet's changed so much in the past sort of 30, 40 years. So only 5 to 10% of colon cancers are truly genetic. Whilst about 25% of people diagnosed with colorectal cancer will have a parent or close family member who also has the disease, there's not a true genetic cause for the disease. So diets and lifestyle behaviours, like genetics, also tend to run in families, thus putting families at a similar risk of certain diseases. And the majority of cases occur in people over 50. It's one of the most preventable cancers, and approximately 90% of cases can be prevented through lifestyle modification and screening. All right, so evidence is implicating red meat and processed meat in the development of colorectal cancer, and this has been building for years. So in 2015, based on data from 800 studies, the International Agency of Research on Cancer classified processed meat as a human carcinogen, so a group 1, meaning that there is enough evidence to conclude that it can cause cancer in humans. Other group 1 carcinogens also include things like cigarettes, asbestos, and plutonium. One serving of processed meat per day increases your risk of colon cancer by 18%. So that would be equivalent to about 2 rations of bacon, 2.5 slices of lunch meat, or 2 hot dogs. So avoiding, in particular, red and processed meats, including pork, lamb, venison, bacon, sausages, meat pies, hams, and salami, will reduce your risk of colon cancer. And that's because you'll be avoiding the carcinogenic compounds that it contains. Guts love fibre. So what is fibre? It's the fraction of the edible parts of the plants, or their extracts, that are resistant to digestion and absorption in the small bowel, usually with complete or partial fermentation in the large bowel. So basically it's the stuff from plants that we don't absorb and our gut bacteria enjoy fermenting. We should all be aiming for at least 30 grams a day of whole grain fibre. Whole grain fibre is things like brown rice, whole wheat pasta, oats, and whole grain bread. And for every 10 grams of fibre consumed per day, you decrease your risk of colon cancer by 10%. It reduces colorectal cancer by increasing the stool bulk, thus diluting potentially carcinogenic substances, decreasing transit time through your bowel, and promoting fermentation and short-chain fatty acid production in the gut. When fibre meets the bacteria in your bowel, the bacteria makes something called butyrate. And butyrate helps the cells in your bowel to stay healthy so that the tumours are less likely to develop.
Eating more fibre can also help you keep a healthy weight by feeling fuller for longer, and being a healthy weight not only cuts the risk of bowel cancer but 12 other cancers as well. We saw a mark slide. New Zealanders just aren't getting enough fibre.
So the gut microbiome. So what is it? Well, it's made up of trillions of microorganisms and their genetic material that live in your intestinal tract.
The body harbours far more microbials, so 100 trillion, and viruses, a quadrillion, than human cells. These microorganisms, mainly comprising of bacteria, are involved in functions critical to your health and well-being. The microbiome is most heavily colonised in the gastrointestinal tract and plays major roles such as energy harvesting and storage, the metabolic functions of fermenting and absorbing undigested carbohydrates, and interaction with the immune system. The gut microbiome is established in early life, beginning during the neonatal period, and
in neonates is affected in utero by the content of amniotic fluid, maternal lifestyle, maternal diet, and maternal antibiotics exposure.
And then postnatally by birth mode, breastfeeding versus formula feeding, and antibiotic exposure. And then during your life, it's affected by several factors, including diet, exercise, genetic background, sex, race, and region. So several factors contribute to the composition of the gut microbiome, and each individual develops a unique gut microbiome. Diet is a major and modifiable factor affecting the gut microbiome.
So the link between low-fibre westernised diets and bowel disease was first recognised over 50 years ago, when it was noted that there was an almost non-existent incidence of these diseases in Africans when compared to rising rates among Europeans and North American.
Western diseases high in protein and fat but low in fibre are thought to raise colon cancer risk compared with African diets high in fibre and low in fat and protein. A study published in Nature Communications in 2015 confirms that a high fibre diet can substantially reduce risk, and shows that bacteria living in the gut play an important role in this effect.
So to investigate the possible roles of diet and gut bacteria, an international team carried out a study with a group of 20 African American volunteers and another group of 20 participants from rural South Africa.
The two groups swapped diets and under tightly controlled conditions for 2 weeks. The volunteers had colonoscopy examinations before the diet swap, and the researchers also measured biological markers that indicate colon cancer risk and studied samples of bacteria taken from the colon, so their microbiome. At the start, when the groups had been eating their normal diets, almost half of the American subjects had polyps, which are the abnormal growths in the bowel lining that may be harmless but can progress to cancer. None of the Africans had these abnormalities. And then after 2 weeks on the African diet, the American group had substantially less inflammation in their colon and reduced biomarkers of cancer risk. In the African group, measurements indicating cancer risk dramatically increased after 2 weeks on the Western diet. So the findings suggest that people can substantially lower their risk of colon disease by eating more fibre. But this is not new in itself, but it was surprising to see how quickly and dramatically the risk markers can switch in both groups from changing their diet.
This study here, published in Nature Immunology in 2019, investigates the influence of a westernised diet on the immune status of urban individuals from Tanzania, which is currently undergoing a rapid wave of urbanisation. The authors examined the blood of urban and rural Tanzanians and found significant differences between them, which highlighted the upregulation of several genes involved in the inflammatory pathways in urban individuals. So whole blood from the urban dwellers produced high levels of pro-inflammatory cytokines. So for the medical people here tonight, interferon, tumour necrosis factor, and interleukin-6. By contrast, from rural dwellers had an increased amount of the anti-inflammatory cytokines. So to justify their focus
on the dietary component of urbanisation and to relay the observation that the inflammatory metabolic profile of urban individuals is malleable, they noticed that when the urban dwellers moved to rural areas for seasonal work, their inflammatory markers reduced as their diet shifted. So elevated BMI is another risk factor for colon cancer. So this study here was published in JAMA Oncology. It is a prospective cohort study involving 85,256 women.
And it showed that those with obesity, so who had a BMI over 30, had nearly doubled risk of early onset colorectal cancer compared with women with a body mass index of 18.5 to 22.9.
The women were aged 25 to 42 years at study enrolment, and then were followed up, so it was from 1989 to 2011. So fat cells are metabolically active and make extra hormones and growth factors, and then this causes the cells in our bodies to divide more rapidly, which increases the chances of cancer cells being made.
So these are the main risk factors for bowel cancer. So 55% of colorectal cancer is due to the combination of those top three there. So the red and processed meats, low fibre diet, and elevated BMI alone is 55% of colorectal cancers. And then you've got also should avoid alcohol and smoking.